Hello? My name is Luna. I live in a beautiful house in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. It's the kind of place that catches your eye: perfectly manicured lawns, tall white pillars, sparkling windows, and a calm quietness that you might mistake for peace. But the truth is, the house might be beautiful on the outside, but the cracks run deep inside. I've always thought of myself as a protector, someone who would do anything for family. My daughter, Sarah, is my only child, and I've given her everything I could. When her marriage fell apart, when she couldn't afford her house, I stepped in. Without hesitation, I sold my condo and cashed out my retirement savings. I handed her the down payment for the house, so she could stay afloat. I even moved in with her, not just as a mother, but as someone who was determined to keep her family together. I promised to help with whatever they needed. For 8 years, I lived in the background of Sarah's life. I paid the bills. I took care of repairs. I managed the house. Sarah never asked me for help; it was expected. She never once acknowledged how much I was doing for her. And at first, I didn't mind. I loved my family. And if I had to sacrifice my peace for them, I would. But over time, something shifted. Sarah's gratitude faded. My sacrifices became invisible to her. My presence started to feel like an inconvenience. Every day, I watched her get further and further absorbed in her own world, her friends, her business. She became less appreciative and more dismissive. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the way she looked at me, like I was just a fixture in her life. The worst part was, I allowed it to happen. I let myself become invisible. I thought that if I kept quiet, kept doing everything she needed, eventually she would come around. But that never happened. I just kept being the silent, ever-present mother, waiting for a thank you that never came. Then, everything changed in an instant. One morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Eli, my grandson. I knew Eli was a quiet boy, often reserved, always observant. When I saw his name pop up on my phone, I smiled, expecting something lighthearted, a funny picture, maybe a video of him playing with the dog. But instead, it was a video. I clicked play, and that's when the floor beneath me seemed to crack open. There she was, Sarah, standing in the middle of the kitchen. The same one I had helped furnish. The same marble countertops I had paid for. The appliances I chose. All the small details that I had sacrificed for. She didn't notice any of it. Instead, she was too busy laughing with her friends, too caught up in her perfect world to see the woman who had helped create it. Oh, please. She's dead weight. Sarah's voice rung out. What would she even do if she wasn't living here? She's just a guest in her own grave at this point. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The video continued, with her friends laughing along, adding their own insults. A woman named Carla, one of Sarah's close friends, chimed in. At least you're doing your good deed, letting her stay. Right, that was the moment the illusion shattered. My heart sank, and I felt a coldness creep into my chest. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was numb. I had done so much for Sarah, and in return, she saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. I had given up everything for her, and this is what I got in return. Not gratitude, not love, just mockery. I didn't know what to do. The room felt too small, the walls closing in around me. My hands gripped the kitchen counter, the cool marble grounding me in the moment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I simply hit save on the video and quietly stored it away. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I had a plan. I left the kitchen, my mind racing. I couldn't keep living like this, letting Sarah walk all over me. She thought I was weak because I stayed quiet, because I let her take everything I had to give without ever showing any appreciation. But I wasn't weak. No. I had just been patient. But now things were going to change. I wasn't going to hide in the background any longer. It was time for me to stand up for myself. Later that evening, I sat alone in the small guest suite Sarah had given me. It wasn't my room. It was just a corner of the house that Sarah had allowed me to occupy. A space where I had learned to live quietly, where I had been invisible. But tonight, as I stared out the window at the neat, manicured lawn, I realized something important. I had been invisible for too long. I had given everything to this family, my time, my money, my peace. And what did I have to show for it? A house that wasn't really mine? A family that didn't appreciate me? And a life that I had quietly sacrificed to maintain. But that was the past. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I was done being the quiet, obedient mother. I was done making sacrifices for a daughter who didn't value them. The next morning, as I walked through the house, I knew things had to change. Sarah wasn't going to stop. She had taken everything from me. And now it was time for me to take something back. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to start somewhere. And today was the day I would finally begin. It's funny how the silence can sometimes be louder than any shouting match. That day, after the video, I went through the motions like I always did. I smiled when I needed to. I nodded when necessary. And I kept my thoughts to myself. But underneath all that, something inside me had broken. It wasn't the video itself. Not really. It was everything leading up to it, the years of sacrificing for Sarah. And now, seeing that she no longer even cared. That evening, I stood at the kitchen counter, absent-mindedly washing my teacup. The warm steam rising from the cup barely registered as I thought about the video. Sarah was out with friends again, likely enjoying a life she hadn't built for herself. A life I had made possible. The thought stung. But it wasn't just the video anymore. It was the realization that I had been invisible in my own daughter's life for too long. I had been so careful, so patient. I never complained, never asked for anything in return. I had played the role of the perfect mother, the one who was always there, always supportive. And what had it gotten me? A life in the background. A mother who was only seen when something needed fixing, but never truly recognized for the effort she put in. It was hard to admit to myself, but I could no longer ignore it. The hurt had built up for years. A slow, steady erosion that I had tried to overlook. But now, it was there. Undeniable. My chest tightened as I thought about all the years I had quietly taken on responsibilities that weren't mine to bear. Convinced that one day Sarah would come around and appreciate everything I had done. I had lived in this house for so long. Paid for it with my savings. With my retirement, I had given up my own future to secure hers. And all I got in return was mockery? The anger didn't come immediately. It wasn't the kind of rage that makes you shout or slam doors. It was quieter than that. Deeper. It was the kind of anger that built up over years of silence. The kind of anger that leaves you hollow. I didn't know what to do with it. So I sat there in the quiet, watching the shadows fall across the floor, knowing deep down that something had to change. But that's when I realized this was no longer about Sarah. This wasn't about fixing things for her, or trying to make her see how much I had done. This was about me. It was about reclaiming the life I had sacrificed. It was about finding myself again after years of being lost in the shadows of someone else's expectations. The next day, the house felt different. The quiet wasn't the same anymore. It was heavy, suffocating, like the calm before a storm. Sarah had left early, and Tyler, my grandson, was at school. I took the opportunity to do something I had been putting off for years, something I had always been too afraid to do. I called a lawyer, David Barnes. A lawyer here in Denver. Was someone I'd spoken to a few years ago when I was first thinking about protecting my assets. I never went through with it back then. I was too focused on making sure Sarah had everything she needed. But now, I was done. I needed to secure my future. It was time for me to stop being the one who fixed everything and start being the one who took care of myself. I met David at his office that afternoon. The building was small, modest, and unpretentious, exactly what I needed. When I walked in, he greeted me with a calm smile, and we sat down at his desk. I need a trust, I said, getting straight to the point. An irrevocable trust. I need to protect my assets, my accounts, my house. I need everything in my name. And I need it beyond Sarah's reach. David listened attentively as I explained what had been happening, how I had spent years supporting Sarah without ever asking for anything in return. I told him about the house, about the video, and about the slow realization that Sarah no longer valued me. He nodded. Understanding the gravity of the situation, we can set up the trust and transfer everything over. He said, but are you sure about this? This could cause quite a bit of tension. I paused for a moment. Yes, it would cause tension. But I was tired of being ignored. Tension was better than the slow erosion of my dignity. It was better than continuing to sacrifice myself for someone who no longer appreciated it. I'm sure, I said quietly. Do what needs to be done. David began preparing the paperwork, and I signed everything without hesitation. It felt strange, like I was finally taking control of my life after years of living in the background. There was a sense of calm in that office, a clarity that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for myself, not for Sarah, not for anyone else, but for me. Later that day, I went back home. The house was eerily quiet when I stepped inside. The echoes of Sarah's laughter and the chatter of her friends seemed to linger in the air, but they no longer had the power to hurt me. I walked through the rooms, my steps slow and deliberate. Knowing that things had changed, I didn't have to stay in this house. I didn't have to be the silent, invisible mother anymore. The following days were filled with quiet determination. I continued with my life, making plans, securing my future, and preparing for what was coming. Sarah didn't seem to notice anything different. She continued with her business, her social gatherings, her life of luxury built on my sacrifices. But I knew that things would be different soon. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't upset. I was simply calm, clear, and focused. The pieces were falling into place. And soon Sarah would have to face the consequences of her actions. That night, I sat in the sunroom, looking out at the familiar view of the garden. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I had taken back control. I had made a choice for myself. And no one could take that away from me. The days following the signing of the trust papers felt oddly quiet. A sense of relief washed over me. But it didn't last. I could feel the tension, like the calm before a storm. Sarah was still wrapped up in her high-profile business meetings and social events. It was as if nothing had changed. But it had. I had made my decision. And now, I had to face the consequences. Sarah hadn't even noticed the shift. Her voice still echoed through the house. Sharp. Always calculating. But I knew something. She didn't. Everything was already in motion. She was still busy preparing for her latest event, trying to make everything look perfect. As usual, the walls were up, and her game of appearances continued. But she didn't realize that behind her carefully curated life, the foundation had cracked. I had spent years giving Sarah everything: money, time, energy. But all it had gotten me was disrespect. I had been silent for so long, thinking that if I kept giving, kept staying quiet, one day, she'd come around. But now I knew better. Sarah had been taking advantage of me, and I had let her. No more. The next day, I went to the community center. Away from the chaos of my home, I spent the afternoon folding clothes for a charity event. The people there were grounded. Real. They didn't care about wealth, about status. They were the kind of people who knew the true value of hard work and sacrifice. Not the kind of shallow life Sarah surrounded herself with. I was beginning to see the truth. Clearly, I didn't need the grandeur. I didn't need Sarah's world. I just needed peace. When I returned home, the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah was still frantic with party preparations. She didn't notice me at first, which suited me just fine. I wasn't the invisible mother anymore. I had reclaimed my power. That evening, Sarah tried to manipulate me again. Mom, I've decided we're hosting a dinner next weekend. Some of my business contacts will be there. It's going to be upscale. Her voice was sweet, but I could hear the edge in it. The command she thought she still had over me. I nodded, keeping my voice neutral. That sounds lovely, I said, even though I wasn't interested. But then she added, I think it's best if you stay in your suite during the party. These people can be judgmental. I wouldn't want them making assumptions about our situation. The words hit me, but I didn't show it. I had heard it all before. Instead, I stood up, calm and composed. If you'll excuse me, I'll head to my room, I said, turning away before she could say anything else. It was the first time I had walked away from her without second-guessing myself, and it felt like a victory. Sarah still thought she had control, but she didn't. Not anymore. The next morning, I went to see my lawyer, David. He had already prepared everything: my house, my assets. All the things Sarah had taken for granted were now legally mine. The trust was in place. I was in control. When I returned home, Sarah was still oblivious. She was preoccupied with the event, that her mind too busy with the details of her party to realize the shift happening right under her nose. That evening, Sarah tried again. Her voice was sugary, sweet, but I could see through it. Mom, we need to talk. I'm just so stressed about this party. It's a lot. I didn't engage. I simply replied, we don't need to talk anymore. Everything's been decided. She froze, her eyes wide with confusion. I could see it. She hadn't been prepared for my answer. She thought I would just keep giving in. But that wasn't going to happen anymore. I had made my choice, and now she had to face the consequences. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. I had reclaimed my power. The storm was coming. But this time, I wasn't caught in it. I was steering it. The days that followed felt strangely calm. But beneath the surface, I could sense a growing storm. Sarah, still oblivious to the changes happening around her, was buried in her work and social events. She continued planning her big party, as if nothing had shifted, as if the perfect life she built was still intact. But the truth was, Everything was starting to unravel. I spent my days quietly, focusing on the small, simple things. The house that once felt like home now seemed like a stage, a place where I was merely an extra in her performance. I didn't belong in the life she had crafted. It wasn't a life built on love or respect, but on manipulation and control. And I had finally had enough. The calmness that surrounded me in those days felt like a quiet before a storm. I went for walks, thinking through everything that had happened, everything I had sacrificed. I thought about the years I had spent trying to make Sarah's life perfect, trying to fix every problem, trying to be the invisible one who quietly made it all work. But those days were over. I was done being invisible. When I returned home from my walk, the house was eerily quiet. Sarah wasn't home yet. And the usual noise, the clicking of her heels, the constant phone calls was absent. I relished the silence. It was peaceful. A stark contrast to the tension that had filled the house for so long. I knew something was coming, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had made my decision, and now it was time to face the truth. That evening, Sarah finally returned home. Her movements frantic, hurried. She was on edge. Not the poised woman I had once known. The mask was slipping, and I could see it. She was losing control, and she knew it. She handed me a stack of papers, her voice sharp and demanding. "Mom, I need you to sign these papers," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "It's just a formality. We need to finalize everything for the party." I took the papers from her, but I didn't need to read them. I knew what they were. She wanted me to sign them to ensure that everything stayed in her control, to keep the illusion of perfection intact. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. "I'm not signing anything," I said firmly, my voice steady. "Everything has already been decided." Her eyes narrowed, disbelief crossing her face. "What do you mean?" "Everything's decided. You don't understand how much is riding on this. You have to sign." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. I had spent so many years making sure she had everything she needed, making sure her life was perfect. But what had I gotten in return? Disrespect, manipulation, a life that wasn't mine. "I'm not fixing things for you anymore, Sarah," I said quietly. "I'm not going to be your backup anymore. This time, you'll face the consequences." Her face went pale. She didn't know how to react. The control she had over me was slipping away, and she was losing her grip on everything. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to apologize, to make excuses for her actions. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stood there for a moment, her eyes searching for a way out of the situation. But there was no escape this time. "I've spent years making sure you had everything you wanted," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've given you my time, my money, and my life. But now, it's time for you to stand on your own. You can't rely on me anymore." She didn't respond. Instead, she just stood there, frozen. Her world was crumbling, and she couldn't stop it. "I'm leaving," I continued. "I'm done. You've taken everything from me. But now, I'm taking it all back." For a long moment, there was silence between us. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stood there, processing what had just been said. And for the first time, I felt a sense of victory, not because I had won, but because I had finally found my voice. I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. That night, as I sat alone in my room, I felt a quiet sense of peace wash over me. The storm had passed, and I had weathered it. The years of sacrifice, of being invisible were finally over. I was free. The next morning, I woke up to a new day. I had made the choice to take control of my life. And it felt right. The road ahead wasn't clear. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in the driver's seat. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. The next few days passed in a strange kind of silence. The chaos that had once filled the house was now gone. Sarah, still reeling from everything that had happened, was nowhere to be seen. I spent my days settling into my new routine, finding peace in the simplicity of it all. No more pretending, no more sacrifices. But the reality of what had unfolded settled in. Sarah was still my daughter. But I knew now that I couldn't be the person she needed me to be anymore. I had given her everything. I had my time, my money, my soul, and it hadn't been enough. In the end, it wasn't about money or possessions. It was about respect, love, and the truth. And Sarah had never truly understood that. As the days wore on, I could feel the weight of everything I had been through lifting. I was no longer trapped in her world. No longer the invisible woman in the background. I had finally taken control of my life. The house that once felt like a prison now felt like a distant memory. I took the time to focus on myself for the first time in years. I started attending yoga classes, reconnecting with old friends, and spending time with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. I had spent so long trying to fix everyone else's problems that I had forgotten about myself. But now, I was finally putting me first. One afternoon, Tyler called. He hadn't been in touch much since everything had happened, and I could sense that he was struggling. He had always been caught in the middle of Sarah's manipulations. Torn between his loyalty to her and his love for me, I knew it hadn't been easy for him. "Grandma, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" he asked. His voice soft. "I'm doing better, sweetheart," I said, my heart swelling with love for him. "I'm finally free." "I know," he replied. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. You did the right thing." I could hear the relief in his voice. For the first time, it seemed like he believed in me. Like he saw the strength I had hidden for so long. "Tyler, I didn't do it for you or for anyone else," I said. "I did it for me. And that's something you need to remember too. You have to take care of yourself first. No one else will." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I know. Grandma, I'm trying to. I'm proud of you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And I know you'll be okay. You're stronger than you think." That conversation with Tyler was a turning point. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone. He had finally understood what I had tried to teach him for so long, that self-care, self-respect, and self-love were the most important things we could give ourselves. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that the real victory wasn't the house, the money, or the trust. The real victory was finding myself again. It was regaining the power I had lost, and realizing that I could stand tall, even in the face of betrayal and loss. For the first time in years, I felt free.